This is a lecture on poetic books. So I will now share my screen. Let's look at our notes on the poetic books. So topic 4.4, poetic books. So in the poetic books, we will cover the Psalms and Song of Songs. In the Christian Old Testament, even ecclesiastics is actually classified as poetic books. But in my lecture, I will cover that with wisdom literature instead. So in poetic books, this section, we will look at first Psalms and then Song of Songs. So first, the Psalms. Now the title Psalms come from the Greek word psalmoi or Latin psalmi. The root word is psallein, which is a verb that means to sing to the accompaniment of a harp or lyre. And the Hebrew original word for it is tehillim, for praises. The Hebrew root word is hallel, as in hallelujah. So hallel is like praise, and hallelujah is praise the Lord, praise Yahweh. So the Psalms has many authors. It is a collection of psalms that perhaps is being used for praises during the worship sessions of the Jews in the Hebrews in the temple and of that sort. So it ended up as a collection in the Hebrew Bible, perhaps it's used as their hymnal as they come together to worship. So it's a collection of all these pressed songs that they have when they come to worship. Now, many authors, 73 of the 150 Psalms are attributed to David, and 13 of it has a specific superscript notes that actually associated to a certain event on his life. How valid it is, we are not sure, but at least those superscript tell us about who might be the author or the writer of the psalm and what is the event that drive him to actually write that psalm. Now, I'd like to highlight here in the Hebrew word, usually when it's attributed to someone or a psalm of somebody, the of in the original Hebrew text is le, which could also mean to. So there's an argument sometimes among biblical scholars that ask the question, does that mean actually that the psalm is being written by that person, or was it just a remark that says that this is attributed to him, or there is certain contribution from him, or it's just a relationship that says tie this psalm to associate this with this person. So it's just a note for us to know. Now, there are also Solomon in Psalm 72 and Psalm 127 is attributed to him. There is a choir leader by the name of Asaph, and quite a number of hymns are attributed to him. 50, 73 to 83 are Psalms of Asaph. And the Korathites, who are also choir leaders and musicians, perhaps in the temple of Jerusalem. So Psalm 42, 44 to 49, 84 to 85, and 87 to 88. There's a person by the name of Heman, who is actually attributed with Psalm 88. There's Ethan, 89, Moses, 90, and another name, Jeduthun, for Psalm 39, 62, and 77. Again, among biblical scholars, there are actually some discussion that some of these people might be the same, like Ethan is actually the same as Jeduthun and all this, and that kind of an argument or perhaps a discussion. In terms of structure, the psalm, according to Herman Gunkel, the form critic, and quite a number of biblical scholars who study Psalm. Psalm 1 and 2 can be considered as the prologue of the book of Psalms, right? So when what's his name? When Cameron and what do you call who else? Brueggemann and all this, they all somewhat agree to this notion that someone that is about the law, and some two that is about the king, which is the messianic king, okay, the king, the king himself, the king of heaven, the king that God has chosen to enthrone, right? That king has in some two has a kind of a messianic kind of a notion, right? So some and two can be taken like the prologue of the entire book of Psalm, putting the law and the king as in the servant of God to rule over and to lead his people. These two are the main themes of praises in the book of Psalm. Right now, Psalm is actually the book of Psalm, or the book of the Psalter, is arranged in 5 books. You would, I mean, when you read the Bible, some of the books would actually show that to you. They say this is book 1, this is book 2, this is book 3, something like that. So 5 books. And again, Hermann Gunkel and some of these classics critic and scholar of the Psalm consider this, that it is corresponding to the Pentateuch, the 5 first books of the Bible. And at the end of each book, there will be a doxology as the climax of each of the books. So book 1 is Psalm 1 to 41, and the doxology is found in Psalm 41, verse 13. Book 2 is verse 42 to 72, and the doxology is found in Psalm 72, verse 20. Book 3 is Psalm 33 to 89, and the doxology is found in Psalm 89, verse 52. Book 4 is from Psalm 90 to 106, and the doxology, Psalm 106, verse 48. Finally, book 5 is 107 to 150, and Psalm 150 is the doxology of book 5 and considered as a doxology of the entire book of Psalms. So the whole mood usually in each book or in the whole book of Psalm is usually, it starts with the praise, and then it goes down to the sorrow of mankind. There will be a depression, and there will be expression of complaints. There will be sadness, sorrow, etc., challenges, and so on. And then it will go back up again until the point of praise, where the psalm just bring a message of praise to the Lord and adoration. So usually that would be how it would go as you go from psalm to psalm. Notice the number of psalm in each book may not be equivalent in number, some more, some less. But I'm just thinking, it's my take that it could be that when these psalms are written, is written on scroll. So book 1 is a complete scroll by itself. Book 2 is a complete scroll by itself. Book 3 is another scroll like that. So that it's easier for them at that time to go and say, hey, I want to look at book 3, which number, which psalm and things. And each of the psalm is not necessarily connected with one another. So it's just like a song book. You just put the book, the songs there. There is not necessarily having any connection with one another. So when we study the psalm, sometimes there may not be a prior context or later context to talk about. It would be just one particular psalm by itself. Unless we study a middle part of a psalm, then we may have an earlier context, that is the parts before this section and the parts after this section, to consider, to understand what one particular section of a psalm actually mean. Another thing to note is that some parts of the psalm, though, they do have a certain kind of a common theme. For instance, from Psalm 121 to 134, 15 psalms, they are known as the Song of Ascent. So this group of psalms seem to have a certain thematic connection. So when we read these psalms, maybe we would have to consider whether it's related. Some Scholars of the psalmists also feel that certain psalms seems to connect with one another, like Psalm 22 and Psalm 23. Psalm 23 we know is a very familiar psalm to all of us. When David say, "The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want," things like that. But some students and scholars of the psalm consider that Psalm 22 and Psalm 23 has a certain connection in the contents and the lesson. So those are up to our scholastic examination when we are interested to look into it. But basically, it's a songbook. You just pick the psalm and you want to express your feeling to God and you want to praise Him like that. In the Septuagint, interestingly, there's actually Psalm 151, and this is about David and his victory over the Goliath. Right? So just for your information. So type of psalms. So there are several types over the years when, Herman Gunkel, again, is the guy who actually started this. So people start to categorize different sorts of psalms, right? And in the recent years, you have people like Brueggemann who actually begin to classify them according to his own style, right? Okay, so basically it is quite a common discipline among the scholar of biblical poetry when they study psalm to try to classify the different sorts of psalms in different category. So for instance, you have what is called hymn, which is simply just song of praise for a whole variety of occasions. You have Psalm of Yahweh's enthronement, which are psalms that celebrate the kingship of Yahweh, like Yahweh is king, something like that. And sometimes it is noted that perhaps some of this kind of psalm is sung particularly during the coronation of the Hebrew king in the olden days. Well, who knows it's true or not, but maybe it's true since it's about a royal kind of psalm, right? There is also this kind of psalm called royal psalm, which is associated to the ideology of kingship in Israel, which are probably very appropriate to be chosen by the Levitical choir to sing as a worship at the coronation of the kings and so on and so forth. So of course, a rich part, of the psalm is the individual and the communal complaints or laments, when individual actually express their difficulty and their challenges and their complaints to God. Wow, why like that? How long? This things like that. And there are also communal one when you actually detect that the kind of complaint or lament or the call of agony that is actually presented to God comes from a community rather than a person individually. So pleading to Yahweh either from an individual or from a collective group of individuals. And there's, in the same way, there are also individual and communal thanksgiving. So this could be prayer or offering of thanksgiving that comes from an individual or comes from a group. And at times it's accompanied by some kind of talking about sacrifice in ritual context. So we bring sacrifice of praise unto the Lord or something like that. Okay. Now, something slipped my mind. But anyway, so this is some of the psalms. And there is something that's called a wisdom psalm, reflective and meditative and didactic. There are some wisdom that is depicted in this, discerning what is good and what is evil and things like that, right? And then others, different kind of cluster of psalm, like Song of Ascent that I told you just now. So this classification of the psalm in Hebrew Bible can be found in Collins, where they tell you this is the one, this is the one. But mind you, if you pick up any commentary about the book of Psalms written by different authors, you might see different sorts of categories that they try to categorize. This is just one of those disciplines that the scholars do when they actually go for the study of the book of Psalms. They attempt to categorize them so that, according to Herman Gunkel, you can catch the Sitzheim 11, the situation in life, correctly to understand the nuances and the well, inside meaning, the feeling of the psalmist and so on and so forth when they write it. Okay, what are the themes we can find in the book of Psalms? So in the Psalms there, we will find this kind of themes, like the depiction of the deplorable situation of the human when the laments is sung and things like that, how they actually say how weak we are, how so, and so on and so forth, you know. And there's a portrayal of the image of the kingship of Yahweh with a Zionist theme, like when Yahweh is on his mountain, nothing can shake it and things like that. So they are very, what you call that kind of a thematic presentation of Yahweh as king and the protector of Jerusalem. The portrayal of the theology of human kingship in association with Yahweh, like in the royal psalms and things like that, and in Psalm 2, when they associate the human king with Yahweh as the king of heaven and as the ultimate king who actually grant power to this human king. And the portrayal of the character of Yahweh, of course, in the hymn of praise and psalms of thanksgiving and so on and so forth, there will be certain parts of the psalm that might sing out the attribute of Yahweh for our understanding. Now, the struggle for us to study psalm is this. Do we go with the emotion or do we go with the instructions? How do we read the psalm? Do we appreciate their emotional significance or instructional wisdom? Throughout the ages, beginning from the church fathers, there are this kind of concern, right? So Augustine, for instance, feels that even the psalm has instructional wisdom. He took it nominally in a sense that when we read the psalm, you read it line by line, and there are lessons inside there for you to take and to apply, right? But in recent years, the scholars of biblical poetry, after taking in influence of philology, which is the study of development of historical languages and things like that, they begin to appreciate some or any biblical poetry as a kind of a, how do you call it? Emotional rendition of the writer of the poems. So the poet, when they write these psalms or these poems, they are writing it to express certain emotional state in them. So in order to understand biblical poems, we should go from a literature angle to see how do we actually understand poems and things like that, and what do you call this, appreciate it like a poem. Then we will see what the psalmist is driving at and how it would enhance our relationship with God. So which one do you go? Do you completely read psalm with the head, or do you read psalm with the heart? I think we need both. When we read the psalm or any of the biblical poetry for that matter, Song of Songs, Psalms, or even some parts of Job and Ecclesiastes, when it is a poetic language, then we have to take it, this is a poem, so don't take it literally, right? So like for instance, Psalm 66 or what, there are some actually very hyperbole, very hyperbolic, exaggerate a lot, like David say, I cry until my tears, wet my pillow, or my mattress, the floating, how can you cry until the tears come out so much, right? So those are like hyperbolic kind of exaggeration to express the sadness in his heart and things like that. Or if you read Psalm 137, by the rivers of Babylon, right, and so on and so forth, we lay down our tormentors torment us, and in the end, blessed is the person who take your baby and smash his head on a rock. But we cannot take that literally to say that God actually allow people, what you call blessed people who actually kill other people so violently, but in the name of revenge for his people, right? So of course we cannot take that literally in that sense of having a lessons or a certain kind of instructions. I think, definitely that is not the case. We probably need to think that, hey, that is an expression of anger, of anguish, of sadness and sorrow and things like that, that is expressed in quite a kind of a pictorial or vivid manner, right? As a psalmist or as a poet. Now I have put down here a few what do you call illustration of how the book of Psalm is structured. I just pick it out from Google. You can go there and Google, you get many things, right? So Psalm at a glance by different people. Basically, you see the 5 books and so on and so forth. Okay, let's go to Song of Songs. Right, Song of Songs. The title Song of Songs come from the Hebrew. In Hebrew is Shir HaShirim. Shir is song. Shirim is songs are plural. Ha is the. Okay, Shir HaShirim in chapter 1 verse 1 basically give you an idea. This is the greatest of the songs. Song of the songs. Okay, right, the top lah among the songs. And then why do sometimes we hear the title, especially in Christian OT, they give it a title called Song of Solomon, because in chapter 1, verse 1, it's actually say, Shir HaShirim Asher LeShlomo, right? That is the song of the song that is to Solomon, okay? So, like I told you just now, this word le, right, in Hebrew is literally translated as to, but in the history of translation, is often also translated as of when it has a certain kind of context like this. So song, so when it translated, so it becomes songs of Solomon. That is of Solomon. That sounds like Solomon has written it. So not, does it really mean that this is written by Solomon? So that is a question that what you call more recent biblical scholar begin to ask. Right? Does it really mean that Solomon write this? Later we see the debate. Why like that? In the Old English translation, this is translated as canticles. So this is from Latin vocate canticum for songs. Okay. Categorization in the Hebrew Bible, the Song of Songs is actually classified or listed as the first of the 5 scrolls, the Megillot, in the writings. So usually this is read during Passover time, right? So to remember the love of Yahweh and his people, right? So in Christian OT, this is placed among the poetic books. As I say, it grouped together with Proverbs and even Ecclesiastes, which are attributed to Solomon. Yes, in the Christian OT, often Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, and Psalm are all classified as poetic books. To some extent, parts of the books are poetic, but not necessarily all. So personally, I classify Proverbs and Ecclesiastes under wisdom because they're actually compilation of wisdom, right? So interpretation approach. So how do we actually interpret Song of Songs? I don't know whether you have read Song of Songs, all the 8 chapters one go, right? So there are different approach in doing this. Traditionally, the Jewish rabbi take this book and they interpret it allegorically. That is, to use it as an allegory between the love of as an allegory of the love and relationship between Yahweh and Israel, like the relationship between 2 lovers, like that. For the Christians, of course, taking after the rabbinic tradition, the Christians take this book and use it to actually depict the love between Christ and the church as the bride of Christ, right? So that is an allegorical reading. In other words, when you read the Song of Songs, you don't even want to talk about what's happened there and things like that. because you read it as an allegory. Oh, this is God. This is. So the girl is church or Israel. The guy is Yahweh, something like that, or Christ, right? So read it allegorically. There's also a kind of interpretation approach that treat this like a drama with 2-3 main characters there. And of course, their friends also are characters. So if you read Song of Songs and you imagine this is a theatrical play and you want to do a production, so you need 2-3 main characters. The Shunammite girl, her lover, and Solomon, question mark, do you need Solomon? And you have the girl's friends, right, who is there to sing to them, and the man's friend also, so that kind of thing. So it can be produced, a production, like a theatrical play or something like that. There's also another approach to look at this, like this is a collection of wedding song in the old days, and from there you see what is the meaning of wedding, marriage, and so on and so forth. So it's considered that this might be developed from the song of a fertility cult of olden days, which means because it's very explicit, some kind of description in the Song of Songs is kind of a rather what you call explicit and sensual. I mean, I just take a few passages to read to you. Song of Songs. It's so small there that you can't even find it. It's after ecclesiastes. Okay. Where is that part? I'm going to try to look for something that's very interesting for you. Okay, now I'm going to read from Song of Songs chapter 6, verse 4 to verse 9. So this is like the man actually praising his lover, the girl. You are beautiful, my darling, as Tirzah, lovely as Jerusalem, majestic as troops with banner. Turn your eyes from me, they overwhelm me. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep coming up from the washing. Each has its twin, not one of them is alone. Your temples behind your veil are like the half of a pomegranate. 60 queens there may be, and 80 concubines, and virgins beyond number. But my love, my perfect one, is unique. Now this is still okay. How about where is that part already? Let me look for something else. That's more sensual. Description of the body. Okay, chapter 4. Chapter 4, similar thing, describing the lover, your teeth like a flock of sheep. Okay, let's say from verse 3 onward, chapter 4. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with elegance. On it hang 1,000 shields. Your two breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies until the daybreak and the shadows flee. I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. Oh, beautiful you are, my darling. There's no flaw in you. Very explicit description of the female body, right? And chapter 3, there's that kind of yearning that this woman is actually saying, number 3, chapter 3, verse 1. All night long on my bed, I look for the one my heart loves.
I looked for him, but did not find him. I will get up now and go about the city through its streets and squares. I will search for the one my heart loved. And then you go. And then until, you say, verse 4, scarcely had I passed them when I found the one my heart loves. I held him and would not let him go till I brought him to my mother's house, to the room of the one who conceived me. Well, sounds very sensual or romantic, or the girl go outside there to look for the man and bring him home. Okay, so that is why there is that kind of theory that says that this might have been a song that is from a fertility cult in the olden days, who actually encouraged very open and liberal sexual activities, right? And there's also a theory that says that this could be a love poem or a collection of love poems that finally put together, right? So inside. Now, the issues with Song of Songs are many. So among them is this. Number one, is the author really Solomon? The evidence for it is the name Solomon is mentioned 6 times in the book, but you read the book for yourself. Sometimes when it is mentioned, it is not that, I mean, like that, it's not that he's talking about Solomon in person. In a poem, it might be a figurative speech. But anyway, you make your own judgment. Against is because in this book, there are borrowed Persian words like pardes for garden in chapter 4, verse 13. So it is impossible for Solomon to have written this with a borrowed Persian words that come much later in the post-exilic age. So it's because of that most recent scholars who study Song of Song would argue that this is probably written during the exilic, at least a Persian time or post-exilic, because it borrowed Persian word. So maybe even later into the Hellenistic period, because there are certain depiction of the sensual parts of it that has a Hellenistic influence. So is it canonical? Initially, it's questioned by some Jewish rabbis that this book may not be considered canonical, but eventually it makes its way in there in an allegorical sense. So the Jewish rabbis agree that we read this in a context like we use it as a meditation of the relationship between Yahweh and his chosen people. Now, popular theories about the content of the psalm and some of the antitheses, right? So there are 3 theories referring to Ian Duquette, right? The OT scholar. So he what they call analyzed and found that there are 3 popular theories. In fact, the first 2 are more popular, right? The third one come later, more recent. So the first one is about, this song is about the love affair between a peasant girl and Solomon the king. So this is like, the theory is that this is a song written by Solomon who, one day visited the kampong and then found a peasant girl that he loved. You look at chapter 6. Chapter 6. This girl is a Shunammite, which is in the hill country of Ephraim. And there is that depiction of her. Let me find that again. Okay. In chapter 1, verse 5, it says, "Dark am I, yet lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem," describing the complexion, right? So I'm black, but I'm beautiful, right? So depicting the color of her skin is dark, right? So this is so I mean, I know sometimes we would have some inferiority complex. We have a sense of inferiority about our skin color and things like that.
for some reason, because this is a curse among mankind, that we have always done this often enough to go and segregate people by ethnicity, by the color of their skin, racial background, etc., etc. But in the Song of Songs, you find this very profound statement: I'm black, but I'm beautiful. Dark am I, but I am beautiful, yet lovely. Okay, so learn to love ourselves, despite of our whatever complexion, what other people think of us. It doesn't matter. We are still beautiful. Okay, then then in chapter 6, that is where it mentioned, where is it earlier? Hang on. Then in chapter 6, verse 13, the friends of the girl actually sang, come back, oh Shulamite, come back, that we may gas on you. So this is the heroine in this poem is a Shulamite girl who, I mean, nobody actually know where Shulam is, but it is denote that it might mean Shunam, which is a place somewhere in the hill country of Ephraim, in the middle highland of the Palestine. So this is a peasant girl. She need to go out to the field every day, that she is tan dark. So then this theory about this love affair, maybe Solomon met her one day and then fall in love and so on and so forth. But hey, Solomon got many wives, one war. So suddenly meet one girl and then want to marry her again. This is adultery, right? As far as Christian teaching and Jewish teaching is concerned. So this theory doesn't seem right. Okay. Then number 2, another theory is about a peasant girl taken by Solomon to be his concubine, who has a lover, meaning the girl has a lover in the kampung, in her village, but somehow Solomon took her as a concubine back to the palace. That's why chapter 3 say, I slept and all night I'm thinking about him. I go out to look for him, and finally I grab him and bring him back. Like that is like, again, adultery, right? Okay, so something not very right there as well. So if you ask me, I think I take the more recent theory, because I look at this as a poem about love and romance of a peasant girl and their love and the journey in courtship towards marriage, or even after marriage, which is what Ian to Kid actually purported, right? So, and it is a poem and song. So sometimes the writing of the poem and songs can be sensual, can have a certain kind of sex appeal, certain kind of romantic, what do you call, a depiction or description, so exaggeration and so on and so forth. So in other words, it's not necessarily a real story. It's just a poem that talk about the love story between a Shulamite peasant girl and her lover. Okay, so and you can also from there see a little bit of those kind of love-sick romantic thing inside between the lines of the, what do you call, poems. And then when you look at chapter 3 verse 6 onwards, says, who is this coming from the desert like a column of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and incense, made from all the spices of the merchant? Look, it is Solomon's carriage, escorted by 60 warriors, the noblest of Israel, all of them wearing the sword, all experienced in battle, each with his sword in his side, prepared for the terrors of the night. King Solomon made for him the carriage. He made it of wood from Lebanon, blah, 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 blah. So in a poem, if we look at it as a poem, particularly a love poem, maybe this is not real King Solomon, no, right? So Ian Dukit presented that being a poem, this might be a reference to a wedding, right? This is where their love is finally consummated in a marriage. And when the bride is waiting for the groom to come and take her in a Hebrew marriage, right? And when they saw the what do you call this, the wedding party of the groom coming to her village to take her, it is like Solomon and his God. He looked upon his lover like the most handsome and the noblest of men, right? So the use of Solomon to depict the bride in that sense. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So if we look at it as a poem has its melodramatic kind of presentation, and it would help us to understand a little bit more about between the lines of what's happening and things like that. And if we look at this like allegorically, like this is between the Christ and his bride, the church, and so on and so forth, it could also give us better meaning rather than looking at it like a love triangle between a peasant girl and Solomon and her lover, okay, that kind of thing, right? So of course, there's rather explicit sensual description, the woman's body, sexual desire, even mild suggestion of having sex, that kind of thing. So it's like, does it mean that it encourage a premarital sexual relationship? But again, Ian Dukit, when you look at Song of Song, he highlighted that in many instances, the writer of the Songs of Song has already warned the readers about this, repeated many times in chapter 3, verse 5, there's that warning. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and by the does of the field, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. Right? And then later on, this appear again, I think somewhere else in chapter 7, basically it repeated at least twice as I remember it. Yeah, in chapter 8, verse 4, is repeated again this warning. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. So it is like a kind of a warning to the reader that, hey, be careful, romantic relationship, but do not arouse it until it so desires. Wait for the right time for it to happen, sexual relationship. So yeah, I think it calls for us to actually study the Song of Songs and look at it from a poetic angle, right? To actually understand what is the literary meaning, the literary, not literally, literary, the from a artistic point of view of the poem. So this is Charles Swindoll way of putting it. So the courtship, the wedding in the middle, and then the maturing marriage, because after marrying also still got love fight one, okay, and so on and so forth. I think this kind of thematic, what you call development, has a kind of a well, at least Ian to keep also follow this. So in the middle there's a marriage. All right, so that is about poetic books. I will come back to you about wisdom literature soon.